In the last lesson, we looked at how extended arguments were structured. That is, how various lines of reasoning are developed to support a primary claim. Examining the structure of an argument, that helps us better understand how reasoning is used within that argument. It also enables us to judge how sound that reasoning is and ultimately how well supported the primary claim is. But the study of rhetoric teaches us that arguments themselves are not necessarily persuasive. After all, no matter how well structured or how well supported an argument is, it's still just a collection of ideas. And to effectively communicate those ideas to an audience, we have to pay attention to a few other things. We have to look at how the argument is communicated in an effective way. And one of the most basic ways of presenting an argument in an effective way is through careful arrangement or organization. Now, the concepts of arrangement and organization aren't new to you. You've been considering them ever since you started writing your first essay. So let's stop and think for a moment about the general principles that kind of govern how we arrange ideas in a text. Yeah, just reflect on the following question in a paragraph, write informally and off the top of your head. So, what are some of those general principles of arrangement and organization that help make an argument more effective to an audience? Well, the first thing we need to keep in mind is, of course, the order of ideas matters in a text. In a well-written, carefully written, effectively written text, you shouldn't be able to take a paragraph out of its position and plop it down somewhere else. And that's because the order of ideas should matter. The ideas should build from paragraph to paragraph to paragraph to the ultimate conclusion. Here are, though, some other concepts that we need to keep in mind. In order to help an audience best follow reasoning, writers will often work from general concepts to specific ideas. That is, start with general ideas and get more and more specific. They'll often access what the audience knows beforehand before addressing what the audience doesn't know. That gives the audience something for their new knowledge to sort of latch on to. Writers will often, as well, present their lines of reasoning in parallel fashion. And that's just because our brains enjoy when they can spot parallels between things. That helps clarify ideas. And lastly, writers will often anticipate the audience's questions and address them. In fact, that's kind of the guiding principle of all idea arrangement down to the sentence level. You start by writing your first sentence, and then the second sentence should sort of answer the question that the first sentence raised. And then after the second sentence, well, you should anticipate the audience's next question and answer that in the third sentence. And so that's why an extended text, we sometimes call it a discussion, even though there's not actually two people participating in it. You're writing by yourself, but you have to treat it like a discussion, as though you are responding to the questions your audience would inevitably have after each statement. So argument mapping, like we practiced last time, is really good at illustrating how arguments are structured. However, it can't really illustrate how ideas are arranged because it's not put in any kind of linear form. To really illustrate how ideas are arranged, we really need an outline. Okay? An outline, of course, should start much like your argument map with a primary claim. An outline, though, works from top to bottom, unlike an argument map, which kind of goes from bottom to top. So you start with your primary claim at the top of the page, and then instead of arrows and boxes, you want to just use numbered bullet points to organize the supporting lines of reasoning. Outlines as well have the added benefit of not being strictly contained to just the lines of reasoning. You can include other parts of the text that aren't necessarily part of the lines of reasoning. You can include like counter arguments and refutations, background information that's given like prior to an argument, that sort of thing. All of that can go into an outline of a text. And here, if you're not familiar with it, here's what an outline looks like. Believe it or not, I have had students get to this level several times in the past who've never really made an outline before, never really seen what it is. So this is what an outline looks like. It's a series of bulleted headings and subheadings, and it starts with your primary claim at the top. And then your big headings, your big ideas are indented as far as you can to the left. And then you've got subordinating ideas indented one step over. over, sub-subordinating ideas indented, another step over, and theoretically you can have sub-sub-subordinating ideas beneath those. But what this does is it nests the ideas within the larger ideas that they belong to. So this is how an outline works, and we're going to practice writing one together here in just a moment. So let's outline a text together. Go ahead and open up that William Ellery Channing sermon called Unitarian Christianity that you were prompted to open before the lesson began. And at this time, go ahead and read the text to yourself. Pause the video. And when you're done reading the text, go ahead and unpause and we'll continue with our outline. All right, when you write an outline, it's a good idea to open up a new document, and I highly recommend that you use a digital document and not paper for this. And that's because the best way to create an outline is to do it in layers, to start with your biggest ideas and then gradually get more specific. That means you're going to be adding in ideas, and working on paper is really hard. You'll have to judge how much space to leave in between each line, and that's just a mess. So I highly recommend that you go ahead and open up a new digital document for this. All right, now that you have your new document, we're going to start by identifying the primary claim and place it just at the top of our document. The primary claim in Channing's sermon is right where it should be. It's in the first paragraph toward the end. Yeah, there it is right there. This authority which we give to the scriptures is a reason for studying them with peculiar care, and for inquiring into the principles of interpretation by which their meaning may be determined. Now, just like within an argument map, you're going to need to paraphrase the author's ideas, because taken out of context without reading the rest of that paragraph, that sentence is really confusing. So let's paraphrase what he means there. Yeah, what he's really saying is this, that Unitarians scrutinize the Bible rather than read it literally, like their Orthodox Congregationalist counterparts that they've kind of evolved from. So we're just going to put that idea at the top of our page. Next, we want to identify the main claims that are made in each paragraph. This is a good way to just sort of get the big ideas down on the page. We just want to arrange them in order as they're written, paragraph 2, paragraph 3, paragraph 4, and so on. And feel free again to paraphrase the claims, because we want this to have maximum clarity. Remember, the goal here, just like with an argument map, is not necessarily to be faithful to the wording, but to be faithful to the ideas. Okay, so paraphrasing is best. So just identify the main claims in each of the 9 paragraphs in this text. And here is what I came up with. Your wording and phrasing may be completely different, and that is fine. So our primary claims there at the top, and then I started with paragraph 1. I think the main claim he's making there is that Unitarians regard the Bible, specifically the New Testament, as having divine authority. In paragraph 2, I think his main claim is the Bible must be interpreted by its readers the same way all other books must be interpreted. Paragraph 3, the Bible expects its readers to make interpretations based on connections it makes both within and outside of itself. And I'll let you read the rest of those there. But this is a great way to start, because it just lists out all the big ideas from the paragraphs in our text. Next, we want to start finding the different lines of reasoning used to support that primary claim. And we want to do that by grouping the statements that we pulled out of each paragraph just according to the ones that sort of go along with one another. Yeah, so focus on the statements that directly support that primary claim, cluster those together that kind of work together to support the claim. And keep in mind, this is not an exact science. There's a lot of different ways to do this. So I've just kind of color-coded them here. This is kind of an early imagination of how they might be grouped together. Yeah, I think that first reason that the Bible has divine authority, I think that one stands by itself. And then I broke the next four up, but I can also see how they're all sort of grouped together as well. But for now, I'm going to keep them all four separately. That the Bible must be interpreted the same way as all other books, that it makes these connections, that readers of the Bible must exercise judgment when reading it, that the Bible's specificity to the time and place, and also the Bible's different authors should interpret how, or should affect how it's interpreted. I put all three of those together because I think that the items, excuse me, the main idea in paragraphs 5 and 6, those are kind of different ways that readers should exercise judgment and apply reason to their reading. So I clustered those together. And then number 7, I thought about clustering that along with number 4, but I just kind of left it on its own for now, that Unitarians make their interpretations of the Bible based on a desire to interpret things consistently. The last couple there, those are both part of the counter-argument and refutation, so I just left those alone for now because they're not part of the line of reasoning, so I don't need to really cluster them together just yet. All right, step 4, we're going to take those clusters that we've kind of decided and actually arrange them along different lines of reasoning. We want to make sure that in this process we keep the order the same because an outline should be in chronological order, but we're going to go change our indents so that those statements that support other statements are grouped with them. The other big part of this step is we need to start adjusting our phrasing so that it's all reading as statements that support the primary claim. So be very liberal with your paraphrasing. Make sure you're still faithful to the idea that the author is trying to communicate, but change the phrasing so that it directly supports the primary claim or whatever claim you've grouped it under. And here is what I've got going so far. I've kind of changed some of my statements here to kind of make each one a different claim about the Bible, because the primary claim is about what Unitarians do with the Bible. So Unitarians scrutinize the Bible because the Bible has divine authority, because it's written in human language, because it makes connections both within and outside itself, because it requires reason and judgment. And then I've decided to put that element from paragraph 7 in along with the elements from paragraphs 4, 5, and 6. So I'm saying that the Bible requires reason and judgment to understand because it often discusses ideas that are specific to the time and place it was written in, because it was written by multiple authors, and because it contains contradictions if you read it literally. If you don't allow any room for interpretation, then the Bible's all kinds of contradictory. So that's what I have going so far. And finally, step 5, you just want to keep elaborating. Go back into those individual paragraphs and elaborate on the specific premises and examples that are used to support those claims. We want to keep using indents to demonstrate relations between ideas, keep paraphrasing from the text, and keep playing around with the way your lines of reasoning are grouped as well. Nothing is set in stone. All right, and when you're finished, you're going to have something about as detailed as this. Okay, yeah, Unitarians scrutinize the Bible rather than read it literally because the Bible has divine authority, and the Bible has divine authority because the scriptures are God's revelations to man, and whatever Jesus or his apostles taught is regarded as divine authority. Those are just ideas from paragraph 1. Paragraph 2, the Bible is written in human language. That's supported by the idea when Channing says God's word abides by the established rules for speaking and writing, and speaking and writing require interpretation in order to be fully understood, and that's because meaning is affected by purposes, feelings, circumstances, principles of the writer. Meaning is also affected by the language the writer uses, and so on and so forth. Note that in the past you may have had a teacher tell you that there are rules to creating an outline, rules like you can't have one subheading beneath a heading. Sure, if there are rules to I don't know why there'd be rules to an outline, honestly, because who's going to publish an outline? You're never going to turn an outline into a college professor. So do what you need to do with your outlines. There should be no like official rules establishing how many of one thing you have. That's just because formatting, who cares? This is an analysis tool, right? So you just want to be as detailed as possible and break the whole text down. This one ended up being about, I think, 40 bullet points, maybe just under 40 bullet points, something like that. All right, so if you haven't done so yet, go ahead and finish outlining the Channing sermon just for good practice. But keep in mind this, tools like an outline or like an argument map, they're really helpful for figuring out how a text is put together. Argument maps help show us how ideas support one another. Outlines show us that and also how ideas are ordered within a text. And the reason why we use these kind of tools is not for what we create. No one cares that you can create an argument map. You're never going to turn in an outline. But those tools help us better be able to answer many of the questions on the AP Lang exam. Because you're going to see a lot of questions on the Lang exam that will ask you about the relationships between ideas or about the functions of ideas within the larger argument. So let's go ahead and practice responding to some of those kinds of questions. In the next couple of slides, I've got a series of questions that are like the kinds you will see on the AP Lang multiple choice section, except these are open-ended. So no options to choose from. You'll just have to write about each one. All right, your first question asked, why does Channing begin the text by first reasoning that Unitarians consider the Bible as divine authority? Why start with this? Well, I think this is a really good rhetorical technique to begin with this idea, because remember, his group, the Unitarians, were kind of a new movement, and they were under attack by traditionalists, by these Orthodox Congregationalists, right? And so by establishing right off the bat that they do in fact believe the Bible is divine authority, they're sort of diffusing some of the attacks that have been leveled against them, that we kind of become aware of in the final couple of paragraphs. They've been attacked for valuing reason over their faith and just being generally radical and too radical about how they interpret the Bible. So he leads off the bat and says, we interpret the Bible the way we do. We're open to the possibility that the Bible needs to be interpreted because we value it so much, because we consider it a divine authority. That's why we go to so many lengths to scrutinize it. And so again, I think that kind of diffuses any potential attacks by his opponents, and I think it's a good way to kind of lead off by promoting the most important reason first, right off the bat. The next question asks, in what ways do paragraphs 4 through 6 move from general to specific? And how does this help with the audience's understanding? Well, it's the same sort of, the reason it helps with the audience's understanding is the same reason why we generally like to start with a claim and then support it with specific evidence and lines of reasoning and that sort of thing. So let's look at how he does it here. So starting in paragraph 4, he says that there is no book that demands more frequent exercise of reason than when reading the Bible. Okay, so that is his kind of general statement by claiming that the Bible requires that kind of reason-backed scrutiny. Okay. He then gives specific examples, specific premises of the different reasons why the Bible must be scrutinized using reason. He talks about the figurative language and the non-literal meanings within the Bible. In the next paragraph, he talks about how there are a lot of portions of the Bible that depart from talking about general truths and refer instead to specific things that were really only applicable to the times and places they were written in. And then in the next paragraph, he talks about how many parts of the Bible are peculiar in that it's very clear they were written by different people with different peculiarities, with different attitudes, with different conditions they were writing under. And so that's another reason why we have to, or why the Unitarians choose to apply scrutiny in interpretation backed by reason to their interpretations of the Bible. So that moving from general to specific is just kind of how our brains work. It's how we bridge the gaps from that primary claim in the very beginning to this more specific premise, then to the more specific premises that support that. And just that kind of general to specific line of that movement helps us better understand, or helps any audience better understand the point the writer's making. All right, the last question here. What is one way Channing anticipates his audience's objections, and why does he do this at the end? Well, if we look at the last two paragraphs, he anticipates his audience's objections by outright confronting them in the second to last paragraph, saying that he objects to those what his opponents have said about Unitarianism. And in the last paragraph, he actually makes a little concession. We grant that the use of reason in religion is accompanied with danger, but consider the alternative, is what he basically argues there. Why do this at the end? Well, again, it kind of has to do with following what the audience expects, right? They've been hearing all of his reasons in favor of why Unitarians do this, and so by now in their brains they could potentially have a lot of different objections, and so he can address this at the very end before his conclusion. This text, by the way, is not complete. He does go on after this. This is just the first third, but it's a good idea. Yeah, it's a good place to put your anticipating objections toward the end. That way you can kind of cover all of your bases. You can cover all of the objections that might have been raised throughout the first several paragraphs where you're actually arguing your point.